Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning into the podcast, we welcome you and we hope that you return for future episodes. For those who have been with us from day 1, day 30, maybe even last week, we welcome you back to another episode. And this episode tonight is going to be an amazing one because we're going to be talking about world languages. In our K-12 schools, we hear so much rhetoric around math and science and all the other testing subjects that our world languages don't get any love. And that personally bothers me as someone who appreciates the world languages. But before we get into that topic and introduce our guest, I do want to do a few announcements before we get going. So, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, we've been doing a lot of work at Dany Talk Consulting to provide quality content to you all outside of the podcast. So, the first thing I want to talk about is our virtual school, where we're offering 2 courses on Teachable. The first course is called Shape of the Teacher Identity 101, which is based on my first book, Shape of the Teacher Identity. And it's all focused on helping teachers shape who they are as educators so that they can authentically live out their educator missions. And some of the topics that we're going to be covering include culturally responsive teaching, anti-racist practices, classroom management, lesson planning, family and parental engagement, among other topics. So if there are any people who are looking to get some professional development credits or continuing education credits towards their license, this course will help you do that. So reach out to us, book a call with us today at calendly.com/identity talk for educators. We'll be happy to talk with you to hear about your own journey. And then for our educators who are looking to write their own books and self-publish, we also have a course that provides that option called SPELL, which stands for the Self-Publishing Educators Learning Lab. And this is an opportunity for educators to learn about every single step of the self-publishing process so they can become authors and disseminate their messages and their voice to a wider audience. So if this is a dream that you've always had and you've been procrastinating on those dreams of writing that one book that's in your head right now, that may be on your Google Doc that's just sitting in your drive, make sure that you reach out to us at that same URL, calendly.com/identity talk for educators, to book a call with us today. We'd love to hear from you. And then finally, for our people who are into some swag, it's the fall season. We're about to go into the holidays, so we have an apparel shop which we opened recently, which will provide you with hoodies, t-shirts, tote bags, other accessories with some meaningful messages. And today, we actually released our Stay True to the Teacher in You embossed words hoodies, which you'll find at the Teespring shop. So if you visit teesprings.com/store/the Identity Talk Apparel shop, you'll be able to check out some of our latest designs. So that's it for our announcements. And also, before we introduce the guests, make sure that you subscribe to our podcast. We're on all streaming platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. You can even find our video episodes on YouTube for those that end up missing out on the live episodes. So make sure you check us out. If you've been watching us from the beginning, please leave a review so that other people can check us out and learn more about our podcast and the content that we're sharing. All right, people. Now, I want to introduce our guest for tonight. She is a phenomenal educator that I've come to love and respect and admire on social media. She is always somebody who I always look forward to in terms of her messages and just her voice when it comes to matters dealing with anti-bias, when it comes to language learning, when it comes to just her advocacy for world languages. She is somebody that is at the forefront of the movement, and she's an anti-bias educator, a language learning specialist, a consultant, an elementary Spanish teacher. There are just so many words that I can describe for this person. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce her and bring her out to the show to talk with us. And ladies and gentlemen, introducing Françoise Thenoux. Let's welcome her to the show. Hola, amiga.
Cari, hola amigo, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien.
Yo estoy muy cansada. I'm a little tired, but we're here, right?
But it's okay. I'm happy that you took the time to come on the show and talk with us. I know it's been a long day of virtual learning. And by the way, speaking of virtual learning, how's that been for you so far this school year?
It's been really crazy because we started the year like face to face in person, and but I was asked to give my classroom so people can have extra room to avoid, proximity and all that. So my students were in their classrooms and I was teaching from home. And it was super challenging because the school decided this sort of last minute. So I had to change my curriculum, my plans, like a week before classes started. And this week, we're all going remote. So this is the only time where I think it's so convenient that I started on remote teaching earlier because I'm ready for it,
No, and I know for a lot of teachers right now, their districts have been going back and forth between in-person learning and hybrid learning and remote learning because there might be some COVID cases that have come up with teachers and students, which have caused them to evacuate and revert back to remote learning. I know that's been the case here in Boston, and I'm not sure how it is out in Philadelphia.
Philly, it's our cases have increased a lot. And the children Philadelphia Hospital, which is one of the most famous in the country, already told the schools that everybody should go virtual because of the risk,
Yeah. And we'll talk about Philly in a little bit because I don't know if I told you this, but I lived in Philly for a lot of years. I'm a Temple alum.
Oh, you didn't tell me.
I'm a Temple alum, yep. And I actually worked not too far from where your school is. I used to work down in Center City.
Nice.
At the Russell Bias Charter School.
Wow.
19th and Arch. Yep.
We could have been neighbors.
Yeah, your school's right there. I could have walked to your school from there. But this is years ago.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you are from Chile. But outside of that, just tell us about your journey, to America and what ultimately brought you into education.
So it was sort of a little random. I ended high school and I actually, you have to take a test in Chile. And depending on that score, you qualify or you don't qualify for the career you want. So I wanted journalism. I'm still a writer, but I remember I was missing 2 points, something like that. And my mom told me, Fran, you have excellent grades from high school. You can get a scholarship. You're not going to stay at home doing nothing, Latinx mamas. And she's like, you're so good in English. Why don't you take 1 year, study pedagogy with a specialization in English? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And my plan was to do it for a year and then drift to journalism. And once I was in the career and I had a scholarship, I thought I liked it. And I ended up becoming an ESL teacher, an English teacher.
Wow. So I think it's amazing how education just falls into people's laps. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that was the case for myself. I didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be an educator and start teaching children. That was never the initial dream for me. It just happened over time.
And then you're into it and you sort of like it and you love it. And then when I finished my career, though, I thought I need to give, my English is very bookish. I need to be in a place where English is spoken. So I had finished my career, I had my certificate and everything, and I thought, how am I going to make money to travel? So I started working for, beauty products clinic because they pay me better than as a teacher. And I saved money for a year and I came to America as a nanny. I came as an au pair. So I lived one whole year in Indianapolis. Then I came back to Chile and I had a job waiting for me and I stayed there for 3 years. And then I thought, I cannot get used to it. Like, I think I want to go back to the States. So I came back to the States on an exchange program. And then after that exchange program of 3 years, a school hired me and then another school hired me. And I'm still in the wheel of the immigration process. I'm a little scared now because even though I've been here 15 years working, my status to stay here is in danger because my visa expires in December, and the next process that I'm going through, which is the green card, it's for many circumstances, it's taking too long. So I'm crossing my fingers. We're gonna try some miracle with my lawyer, and everybody pray for me. But this is the life of an immigrant. It's like it's never stable. You're never sure that you're going to be able to stay here until you get your papers, your residency.
Oh yeah, I know it's traumatic, and I had family members who have gone through the process themselves, and just to pass the test is challenging because there's so much studying that's involved. I know people think, okay, you need to make sure that you know, like the pledge and the national anthem and, you know, some of the basic history facts about the United States. And we're going to get into the history part in a second because I know you have a lot. I know you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to become a citizen though. Like, I love being a citizen of my country. But I do want a green card so I can work and teach my students in peace, without worrying that I have to leave the country any minute.
Right. And I want to stay on that for a second. So just as an immigrant, I know immigration has been a topic of recent conversation in recent years in the political sphere. And there's been a lot of talk about, the DACA program and undocumented immigrants.
Yes.
And you had families being torn apart and separated as a result of this. And even students who are coming from families of undocumented immigrants not getting access to higher education as a result of that.
Yeah.
So I want to know from you, just as an immigrant, how has this rhetoric impacted you personally in terms of your mental health? How's that been for you personally?
Look, I think I'm privileged because I'm a documented immigrant and I was able to come here, to work, or I was able to do a master's degree here. For 2 years, I taught ESL, and my students were mostly undocumented. And when I think of them, I think of myself, that I don't have the troubles that they have, or the traumatic experiences that they experience on the daily, that continuous fear of having to leave the country, having to leave your house, having to leave your life. But for me, it has been traumatic in the sense that whoever politician is in charge will make new rules. And for example, the last year or so, since 2016, there's been a lot of blockages and like roadblocks in the process of immigration for people who have work visas like I do, or for people who want green cards to work here. because of this nationalism, that the jobs are for Americans. And if you think about it, I've been here 15 years. My school really wants me because I'm very qualified. My school, it's very, it's has an action plan to become a very anti-racist school. So they need an educator like me, and anyway, still my status is, uncertain. So that uncertainty that follows you, through your life, you want to think I'm very optimistic, and I come from like tough neighborhood. So I usually dismiss the trauma that I experienced. But right now, thinking back, all the times that I went to an embassy and that I was humiliated, that I was made feel that I didn't have enough qualifications, that why doesn't an American take my job? I have been mistreated at the airport too. And that is a lot of trauma. And I think right now, because of the situation I am now, I'm just realizing how much I have put up with, through the years.
No, and I can't even imagine, what that trauma is like. I'm just thinking about some of the immigrants who were able to vote for the very first time, and they are in their late 30s, 40s, and they were just so happy to be able to vote because they know how significant, they know how important that privilege is as a citizen, just to be able to take part in that process. So I know it means a lot.
Yeah, democratic process. And Kwame, there are things that when people don't know what I have to say or my message and they feel attacked, I have had people go into my DMs and say, well, go and vote if you're not happy. I'm like, before you send somebody to go and vote, especially an immigrant, double check if that person can vote. Because every time someone comes and tells you, if you don't like it, go and vote. And they do it to try to silence your message, especially when it makes them uncomfortable. And I have posted about this in my Instagram space. Like, that is a voting privilege. And there is citizen privilege too. So you have to be very careful when you use the word voting, because not all of us can, no matter how many years we've been here,
Right. And I think that's why it's important for people to be educated and informed about just the whole immigration process, how you obtain citizenship, because some people believe it's that easy, but it really isn't. I've seen people pass it after maybe 7, 8, 9 attempts.
Yeah.
And
I'm not taking that test, but I can personally tell you that all these years taking work processing work visas, I have had to hire lawyers. I have had to travel to the embassy in my country. And I was talking to my latest lawyer, and I was telling, you know what? I did the addition, and it's like $30,000 that I have spent in the different expenses related to immigration. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, and I'm still not stable here after 15 years. So when people tell me, I remember my boss, very naive, very nice too. He's like, Françoise, someone told me that you're gonna do the green card, and I think we need to go and celebrate in the summer. And I'm like, I have to stop you right there. This might not happen for a year. And he couldn't believe it. Like, really? Yeah. And I said, I've been 15 years here, and they might still say no,
Yeah, that's just unbelievable. And I do believe that there's some things that need to be reformed about that process. And I know that's been something that has been spoken about throughout the presidential campaigns. And hopefully that does get rectified. But now I want to shift gears and talk about your work now. So you are the woke Spanish teacher. I just love the name because it just speaks volumes about what you do, and you back it up You back it up with your posts and your messaging. But I want to find out from you, what inspired you to start this journey as the woke Spanish teacher? Because I know for a lot of people, they may not have been on this, they may not have had this mindset in the beginning, but then they kind of evolved into becoming this person just through education and just through learning and reading and research. And so I just want to get a sense of what your journey was like to get to where you are, or should I say still getting to where you are, because it is a process and there's so much to learn.
It's never ending. That's amazing that you say that. So okay. So first of all, I think everybody should know that I grew up in dictatorship. I grew up in a fascist dictatorship in my country that was sponsored by the government of the United States at that time. So when I attended high school, I went to a school where all my teachers were, after dictatorship, all my teachers were the teachers that were forbidden to teach in when I was in elementary. And I learned so much from them. And one thing that they taught us that I would never forget is to make good use of your voice. And I think I received like a quality education when it comes to politics, when it comes to, you know, human rights, because there were so many human rights violated by the dictatorship. And when that education continued in college, all my teachers that were the teachers, not the teachers of English, but the teacher of curriculum and like philosophy and all the educational sciences, they made us read Paulo Freire. They like taught us with the masters. And I think I got like a really good foundation of what it means to have a voice and a responsibility as having a voice to speak for the things that are unfair. So I remember when I moved here and when I started teaching Spanish, I thought the resources and the curriculum and the curricula and everything was so biased. And it was full of what I call gringeria, you know, like that white lens. And I felt so unhappy on the way Latinx people were being portrayed in that I remember having these conversations with a friend of mine, and she's like, Françoise, you have great ideas. You have all these theory, you know, to back up what you're saying. Why don't you start a professional, you know, account in Instagram? And I'm like, I don't know, because you know that I know there's going to be a lot of retaliation and DMs, you know, and I didn't want to deal with that stress. But, you know, my friend sort of convinced me. I love you, by the way, Carito from Colombia. She's also on Instagram, a great teacher. And from that day on that I opened my space in Instagram, the community grew. And I was happy to discover that other teachers were on the same journey, you know, that they were also, I learned that there was a word for what I was doing that was anti-bias, you know, I didn't know that before. So right. I had to say something. I'm very thankful because my first educators here in the United States, when it comes to everything that I have learned about this country, because the theory that I had was about my country, but the reality here in the United States is different. So my teachers, my inspiration has always been my Black friends, you know, especially Black women. And I feel they have had conversations very honest with me, especially when I firstly arrived and I was very naive, and I learned so much from them. And that also set me in tune to speak about issues that might not affect me, but might affect other communities, you know?
Right. And I think that's what I love about you. You have a way of weaving these themes of social justice and gender equality, equity, and just finding the intersectionality between all those different areas. And that's something that I haven't seen from a Spanish teacher. growing up, all the Spanish teachers I've encountered in K to 12 were white women who were very fluent in Spanish. And they were able to teach the language as far as the conventions and the more traditional aspects of it. But we didn't learn about, the history of indigenous people during Spanish class. We didn't learn about Black history during Spanish class. We didn't learn about gender equality at that time or social justice. It was strictly grammar, conventions, and just the more stereotypical aspects of Latin American culture, which you spoke of earlier. So I'm interested in knowing, how are you able to weave all those different areas and address the intersectionality into the Spanish curriculum? Because I know you teach elementary school students, and these terms that we're mentioning are terms that even adults struggle to grapple. So how are you able to break it down to the younger folks so that they can understand what these different terms mean at that age?
So that's a great question, because that's a question that I get a lot in my space and everywhere. And I have a master's degree in early childhood. I love teaching little ones. That's my passion, So reforming and creating and designing my curriculum has taken me 11 years. See, a lot of people think it happens overnight.
Right.
And I get a little upset when they want things delivered to them in a silver platter, because you cannot create a curriculum or put a curriculum into practice if you haven't done self-work. So in order to simplify the topic so much that you're going to teach it to little ones, you need to be an expert yourself. So what I do, I'm a history geek. I read a lot. And what I started doing is I switched my curriculum, the one that I received, it was actually like an outline, like a grammatical outline, to a theme curriculum. So I teach Spanish through content. And I simplify very much the topics that I teach, but depending on the proficiency of the students, I include more fancy words.
It's 8:30.
You'll be sorry, that's my clock that speaks Spanish.
So good.
Spanish is everywhere, so my students can absorb it. So what I do, for example, if I'm going to prepare a unit, I'm thinking about the Thanksgiving greeting of the Haudenosaunee people. I get the book. I get the key vocabulary, and I created last year something that I call a woke wall. That it is a word wall, but with words that are related to social justice and anti-bias. So I pick a few of those words that are going to be relatable to my topic, and I simplify it in very simple sentence that I speak in Spanglish to the students, so they can understand. And the good thing about the vocabulary related to social justice is that it's usually a cognate. A cognate, it's a word that it sounds very similar in both languages. Like, for example, discrimination, discriminación, justice, justicia. So my students see the word and they are able to identify, and especially if those are words that they've heard in English. And since my school is very progressive, and they get a lot of social justice from all ends, it's not that hard for me to weave these things. But what it's very important is that teachers need to understand that even though you're teaching little kids, you need to be an expert on the topic. You cannot teach these without knowing really well. And that's a mistake that I see over and over, Kwame, that I see these American teachers, they learn a few facts about a country and something that they read somewhere, but they are not experts. And what happened, their resources are simplified, but they end up stereotyping, they end up being insensitive, or it has a white savior lens. So it's very important that the teacher is an expert, and also the teacher has done self-work.
Yes. And to your point, I'm glad that there's more of an awareness about us vetting our instructional resources and materials. So I know there's the 7 forms of instructional bias, which is a good resource to use, which
Mhm.
addresses the stereotyping and invisibility and all the other types of bias that we find in our textbooks and other resources. But I just find it amazing that you're able to do that because it's not an easy job. And I'm glad you point out the fact that this is a process.
Yes.
It's a full process
Yes.
because you have to do your own vetting. You
Yeah.
know, maybe go to a library, you're grabbing a book, you're reading it to make sure that everything is legit as far as
Yeah.
information. You're taking pieces from there, you're taking pieces from here. And then in the process, you're scaffolding all this information in
Mhm.
order to make it developmentally appropriate for your young students so
Yes.
they can process it. And I'm sure you have students who are IEP students and have other types of accommodations. So that requires even more breaking down the content.
Let me tell you, Kwame, it's something that is surprising that I usually talk in conference with parents sometimes is that, for example, I was talking to a first grade mother the other day, a family that I love. They send her little one to Spanish, bilingual, preschool. So when she came to me, she knew a lot of Spanish. All her teachers were Latinx. So this little one is struggling with reading in English. And I was talking to the mother. She told me the little one was getting tested and everything. And I said, this might sound crazy, but I think your daughter is better in Spanish than she is in English. And it's not only because the Spanish language is very pretty much straightforward, when it comes to reading and all that. But I think also the way my class is so scaffolded, you use the right word, so scaffolded that the kids end up learning better. And what happens is that I am also a ESL teacher, and I did so many accommodation and scaffolds for my ESL students. That is something that I bring with me. There's no class or no theme that I teach without that. And I think even my learners that might feel challenged in other areas, they are able to succeed in my class because the class is, learner friendly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we know these things are going on. We know that the scaffolding has to take place and
Yeah.
a whole lot of other grunt work that
Yeah.
has to happen in order for us to get to this point. So I want to know from you, what are some action steps that school districts and just individual schools can take? Because I know that your school is an independent school, so it's not within a school district. But what can those schools take as far as action steps to decolonize their academic curricula? Because we've heard decolonization thrown around in our social media circles. Some
Like
people know what
confetti.
it means, others do
Yes.
not know what it means. So if you can help us clarify what decolonizing curriculum looks like.
Yes, of course. Um, you know what? In my school, we're all in different stages, though. We're all we're all working on separate. Like I started my own, and then, but for example, Quaker schools work through committees a lot. And 2 years ago, for example, I joined the gender committee. And that's the time where we as a committee look for the right training for the faculty. We train ourselves, and we managed to get everybody on the elementary school in our school on board with a gender curriculum. So the change came from us, from we, the people in the committee. Right now, I'm on the diversity and equity committee, and we're working on affinity groups. We also did a training for our faculty, and it's very good because that training comes from us, regular teachers, who are trying something in their own classes. But it's, Kwame, it's going to be super difficult for a school district and for a school to decolonize, because the whole system of education here in the United States, it's colonized.
I agree.
So for me, decolonization, it cannot be something that it's like a patch solution or a makeup. That you put on something, you put on makeup to make it look better. It doesn't work like that. And the mistake that I see a lot in social media, that it sort of gets my nerves, is that people use decolonize your curriculum, decolonize your bookshelf, and they are talking about diversifying. They are diversifying, they are including new voices, but they are not changing the lens. And what happened with settler colonialism, when it all started, when these people left, what stayed was a sort of colonization that it was epistemological and ontological. Epistemological in the ideas, in the beliefs, and ontological on the way of being. So what happens when the colonizers left United States, for example? There was the Christianism, there was all the ideas they brought, the beliefs, it's what stay on top. And the ontological ideas, it's that whiteness, it's better, you know? So unless we work on decolonizing ourselves and decolonizing the whole system and thinking about these epistemological and ontologically, we can add many voices to our curricula. And you can start there, but you cannot lose track that this needs to change. The way we test, our school calendar, the holidays we celebrate, what we center. It is mainly what we center. We need to decenter whiteness. We need to decenter Christianism. And I'm not the Grinch, and I support everybody's faith. But I think every single idea should be placed on the same space. You know what? And in the United States, and I think in my country too, there is a huge debt to indigenous people. So for me, it's very important that in my curriculum, for example, my students see Black and indigenous people all the time, because they have a Spanish speaker teacher that it's white. You know, that it has I have a colonizer looking, because I had great grandparents from Europe. But you know what? I want my students to see the indigenous side of Latin America, the Black side, the Afro-Latinx, community. So if people don't understand that this is not a makeup, this is not a surface change, it's very hard to decolonize. Because so it needs to come, it's a system, it's a structure, but it's so ingrained through ideas and ontological in the way of being, that it's done unintentionally, like unconsciously, because we're so conditioned.
Right. And, being a Black person in America, as I've gotten older, I've had to unlearn things that I learned during my K-12 years, because when you go into those years, you're just doing what you're being told.
Yes.
You're not really giving it any second thoughts. It's not until you get to college and you get to those adult years where you start to have these epiphanies about what you were taught.
Yes.
And you start to unlearn and fix those parts of your learning that need to be fixed. But to get back to your point about this idea of decolonizing the curriculum being a cosmetic thing, I totally agree. I think people want to show window dressing and say, hey, we're decolonizing the curriculum, but in reality, you're still maintaining the status quo.
Yes.
And that in itself is a problem. But I totally agree with you with that. Now, I do want to focus on world languages, because you are a Spanish teacher. I had a phenomenal French teacher, and French was one of my favorite subjects growing up in school. And I loved it so much. But now we're at a point in our education world where the world languages just aren't getting any love. We talk about math, we talk about literacy, we talk about science, but when it comes to budget cuts and
Yes.
laying people off, people in the world language department are usually among the first to get laid off from jobs. Those classes are among the first to be cut from the curriculum. So I want to know from you, in your opinion, what must school districts do to make world languages a priority? And then also, why do you think school districts undervalue the significance of world languages in our curricula?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's colonization. Well, there are so many things, but I'm going to start with is the hegemony of English. This country doesn't have an official language. And the second largest population of Spanish speakers are here in the United States. And yet there's so much discrimination against, Spanish or any other language that doesn't sound fancy or European, you know what I mean? So what happens here is that it comes from the colony, that ontology, that epistemological colonization of thinking what's better. What's better? English is better, German might be better than Spanish. Who speaks Spanish? Immigrants, brown people. You see it in the way that the difficulty that people have to pronounce certain names. That if it's Tchaikovsky, Albert Einstein, they have no problem. But you have a Nigerian name, you have a Hispanic name, and all of a sudden it becomes impossible to pronounce. But this is the bias that people bring, and this is the colonized mindset too. So, and you asked me about the importance of world languages. When I first came to this country as an exchange teacher, I was a Spanish teacher in 2 schools that were, in the areas that don't get a lot of love in Georgia. And after my first year, they closed the program.
It's 8:45.
And my students were devastated. And it was, the inequity was so evident because the private schools didn't cut the programs. It was the public schools. And how are these students going to compete in the, in the world of labor without having the same qualifications as a kid that goes to private school? So I read a list of reasons why the language programs were, being cut. And I remember one of my principals that, oh my God, I love her. She was such a lady and everything. And it's the first time I heard her curse. She's like, "This is bullshit, Miss Thenoux. This is bullshit." And I'm like, I agree. And I remember that's when I started working as an ESL teacher, because there were no more jobs for Spanish teachers in elementary. And I think that happens because people have a view of languages that is dehumanized. They don't see languages as bridges of communication. They see languages as grammar and as a trophy that you put on a shelf. But they don't connect the languages to people. See how important in this country is to speak Spanish? The amount of Spanish speakers in this country, and yet in private schools, there are people who prefer their children to take Latin, a language that nobody speaks now. I have nothing against Latin. I love it. And it would be a great third option. But why don't you want your kid to communicate with their neighbors, with the people in their city, And I think that's the view of languages, it's especially with Spanish. It comes from this colonized mindset of, everything English, all white here, and anything that can be brown or look as foreign or immigrant, it gets that look, like it's not welcome.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. Now, I have a question about Latin.
Mm-hmm.
So, because Spanish and French, they're considered Romance languages, correct? Do you think the reason why people choose Latin is because by knowing the roots of those different words that come in these different languages, they're able to speak those languages better because they understand the origin of the roots of those words? Do you think that's a possibility as to why people...
Well, that's one of the things that people tell when they are selling the programs, I'm telling you, I have nothing against Latin, and I love it because I love I'm a language geek, and I love the epistemologia of the languages. But, if you think about the humanization, and you need a language that you're going to be able to communicate with people that would put you in touch. And you know what? I met a lot of people since Latin classes. They are mainly translation. They don't speak it because nobody right now alive speaks Latin in order to communicate, to live, So right now, your chances of using Latin in the real world are, there are not that many. You speak in
Slim to none.
Yeah. So I met a lot of Latin teachers here that are not Romance language speakers of modern languages that are rooted in Latin, that cannot speak our languages.
All right. I was just curious.
Yeah, but you know what? What you just said is what they tell you when you're going to study Latin. Oh my God, this is going to help you learn. And then you hear a Spanish speaker, blah, 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 with all our dialects, 20 different regions, we speak all different. Do you think the Latin is going to help you understand? It's going to help you read maybe some of the words, but you know what? There are 3,000 words in Spanish that come from Arabic. Do you think
I never knew that? Wow, yeah. Really?
Do you think the Latin is going to help with those words? No. There are 3,000 because Spain was occupied by people from North Africa. And for 700 years, the south part of Spain was Al-Andalus, which is an Arabic califato. And it was longer than it has been modern Spain, So there are 3,000 words that come from Arabic. And see, I think that people need to study more history, Kwame, and to really understand what they are talking about when they talk about languages, because a lot of the things that I hear is like, oh my God, if only these people had read a book, they would know better,
But I think that's a huge part of the problem. People aren't reading the books because it's too much work. It's too time consuming, but that's the work that has to happen.
Yes.
Especially we're talking about decolonizing curriculum. You have to read. You have to gain a fundamental understanding of what's happened generations ago to understand what's happening now, because what's happening now is just history repeating itself.
Yes. Yes.
This is not anything new.
No. We see it every day. When I taught Christopher Columbus to my first graders. We're talking little kids here, but I have a class, they are in second grade now, that it's very like, they have that spark, Right. So we talk about colonizador, Cristóbal Colón, no me gusta, I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. And then I was teaching about immigration. That was my next unit. And I started talking about how colonizadores came to Mexico. And one of my students like, not again. So it's a history that repeats itself and itself because people, even people of color, are not aware of their roots. And I think sometimes, self-oppression comes from that, not knowing your ancestors, not knowing what they went through, therefore not respecting the journey of your family line.
No, absolutely.
Mhm.
But wow, and we could talk about this all night,
Right?
but I know that you have to get up in the morning, so we're gonna go ahead into the lightning round
Nope.
and ask you some lighter questions because
Perfect.
we do want to get to know a little bit more about you
Yeah.
outside of the education space. So the first question I want to ask you is, with everything going on with COVID-19, what has been your go-to self-care activity?
I have like an emergency kit of activities, because I'm also going through this immigration process. So I'm very conscious. There was a time in my life I didn't take good care of myself. And I remember going to therapy with someone who makes Bach flowers, and she told me, "Fran, you need to learn to disconnect. You're too connected. To connect it to your family, you take everybody's problems personally. You want to solve everybody's life. So what I do, I read a book. I do yoga. I have Zoom sessions with my family in Chile all the time. They are like eating dinner or having lunch or having breakfast, and I join them here and I'm eating with them like I were there. And they tell me all these jokes and gossip, and I laugh. Also, going to walk with my friends, because being outdoors is the less dangerous things you can do. So Philly is a very walkable city, as you know, Kwame.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and I love Philly for that because I love walking. So we take walks that last 2 hours, and I think every time I disconnect, that's healing, that helps me recharge. And you'll be surprised about this, but every time I spend time with my students, even though being on Zoom is super tiring and everything, I feel refreshed when I'm with young people, because I'm teaching them and their minds are so open that is so refreshing to hear that open, to feel it, to see, oh my goodness, this might be the people who change this country, maybe in the future, who knows. And every time I'm with them, at the end of the class, I'm tired, physically tired, but I'm also like disconnected from the adult world that is so dark,
Right. No, and those are all great activities: yoga, walking,
Yeah.
and just being in the sanctuary of a space with your students.
Yes.
It
You
doesn't get better than that, even
know,
if it's virtual.
yes, and we dance. And part of my class, I told them, you need to be culturally competent too. So dancing here is not like an option. I'm standing up to dance. You're gonna dance with me, and they have become great dancers. So much that when their teachers saw them dancing, they're like, "Fran, they can dance really well because we dance to a choreography." They're like, "Yeah." They know that in my class is a non-negotiable. We're gonna dance here. So, and dancing, I was talking to them. We saw this video of a little kid doing grass dancing
Mhm.
in a powwow, and he said that the dancing is healing. And I said, don't you feel, I asked my little ones, don't you feel better after you dance? Don't you feel like something like you like shed off something out of you? And they all agree. And that's the beauty of being a kid, that you talk about your feelings, you're vulnerable. And I told them some tribes in different African countries also recommend you dancing, so you can shake off all the bad spirits.
No, that's all very true. All very true. And as you know, dancing brings joy. Joy
Yes,
is a form of resistance, especially when we're talking about revolution. So I'm
yes.
all for the dancing. All right. One book that every educator should read, and I'm pretty sure I know which one you're going to mention.
There are so many, but there's one that I have read lately that it's very educational, and is sustaining pedagogies. Culturally sustaining pedagogies.
Django Paris?
Yes. Yes, and many other authors. And there are, I love it because there are many chapters about decolonization, especially in linguistics. So for me, that was a key book that helped me prepare for the workshops I taught and talk about decolonial approaches to languages and linguistics, you know. So that book is the gift that keeps on giving, because you think, oh my goodness, I'm going through these. What chapter can help me? And you go there, and there's a teacher talking about how they did this. It's like very practical. So there are so many books, but that book to me lately has meant a lot. And in terms of history, I think everybody in the United States should read Indigenous People History of the United States, for that background knowledge that we talked about, you know?
Yes, and that's another great book. But as far as culturally sustaining pedagogies.
Yeah, pedagogies. Yeah.
Yes. I've not read the book, but it's a book that keeps popping up. It's actually a book that I've even recommended to other people because it's gotten so many great reviews based on what you just mentioned. So that's a book that I definitely have on my list that I'm going to get to eventually. I just have so many books.
Tell me about it. I have
so many books.
The beauty of this one is that each chapter is their own island. So you can go back and revisit different chapters, and they're all about different things, you know? So it is not a book that you need to read cover to cover, you know?
All right, that's good to know. All right. If you could invite 3 people to dinner, dead or alive, who would they be?
That's a hard one. And when you sent me this question, I was thinking, oh God, because I want to invite so many people, you know. I would like to invite Sylvia Rivera, just because I think is the bravest person I have ever taught about to my students. The mother of the Stonewall, one of the mothers of the Stonewall riots, a transgender woman that was kicked out of her house at the age of 11, and who fought till the end, even being homeless, even being a drug addict as a result of her life. You know, I think I would love to invite Sylvia. I would love to invite Celia Cruz too, because she's the sort of grandma we all want, you know. And also, I would like to ask Celia about her, you know, her love life, because she had the sort of relationship that everybody wants with Pedro, you know, such a long-lasting relationship.
Right.
And I think I would love to invite Frida too. Frida Kahlo. And there is one indigenous activist from my country that died in very mysterious circumstances, and I think she got killed. In her case, I would like to bring her back so we can, you know what happened and actually make justice. But that's for another reason, not for fun. That would be for justice, you know.
No, it could be for whatever reason. It's your list, your people. You want to add another person, that's fine. But Fran, this has been an excellent conversation. We may need to do a part 2. We may have to do a part 2 because there's just so much that has to be unpacked. But thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. I know you had a long day, and I want to make sure you get some rest for another day with your children.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be here. You know, I admire you a lot, Kwame. And I don't say yes to all the invitations, but when you say, Françoise, would you like? I'm like, yes.
Thank you so much. That means so much.
You're my brother. You're my brother.
Yeah. Muchas gracias, mi amiga.
De nada, mi amigo.
Yeah. Yes, because this is why we have this space for people like you who are trying to fight the system, trying to do what they can to advocate for our babies. So I had to get you on, but I'm thankful that you were able to make the time. So
Yeah,
I'm
no
gonna,
problem. No
yeah.
problem.
So I'm gonna wish you a good night so you can get some rest.
Thank you. Good night to you too. Greetings to your family, your beautiful family. And we'll keep on fighting tomorrow and every day after that one.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Take care.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Ciao. So for those who tuned in today, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Dany Talk for Educators Live. If you enjoyed what you saw today from this episode and would like to continue to see more episodes, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and all streaming platforms. We also provide the video episodes on YouTube through my channel, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, as you can see on my nameplate. So until next time, people, I wish you all good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.